warrant. Get out. Don't you close that door on me.
I don't need a warrant when I can smell it. That gives me the right to walk right through that door. The officer's voice was flat, confident, and dangerously incorrect. He stood on the concrete porch of a modest single-story home, his hand resting casually near his holster, staring down a young man who had committed the unforgivable crime of accidentally pressing a button on his phone. It was a Tuesday evening in Henderson, Kentucky. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. Inside the house, 23-year-old Julian Hayes had been unwinding after a long shift at the local auto plant. He was sitting on his couch listening to music, the volume turned up just loud enough to drown out the hum of the refrigerator, but not loud enough to bother the neighbors. Julian was relaxed. He was in his sanctuary. He had no reason to believe that within the next 10 minutes, he would be engaged in a high-stakes standoff with armed agents of the state, fighting for the basic sanctity of his own living room. But fate has a strange sense of humor. As Julian shifted on the couch, his phone wedged in his back pocket, pressed against the fabric of his jeans, the side button held down. The emergency SOS slider activated, and silently, without Julian even noticing, a signal was sent to the local 911 dispatch center. This single clumsy technological mishap would set off a chain of events that would expose a terrifying gap in constitutional knowledge among the very people sworn to uphold it. It would reveal how quickly protect and serve can curdle into dominate and control. And it would force a young man to become a constitutional scholar in real time, standing in his doorway, while two officers tried to bluff their way into his home. Before we dive into the body cam footage that shocked millions, I want to welcome you to the channel. We tell stories here about the moments when the system fails and how ordinary people stand their ground. If you believe that your home is your castle, and that rights aren't just suggestions, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss how this one ends. The first sign of trouble was the heavy thud of knuckles on the front door. Julian muted the TV. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. His parents, who owned the house, were out for the evening. He was alone. He walked to the door, peering through the peephole. Distorted by the fisheye lens, he saw two uniforms, two badges, and the unmistakable grimace of police officers who were already annoyed. Julian's heart rate spiked. He did a quick mental inventory. Had he been speeding earlier? No. Was the music too loud? Unlikely. He opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged, but then realized that wasn't enough. He needed to hear them. He undid the chain and opened the door halfway, but he planted his feet firmly on the welcome mat inside. He did not step out. He did not invite them in. "Hello?" Julian asked, his voice tentative. Officer Miller, the lead cop on the scene, didn't offer a greeting. He was a younger officer, maybe late 20s, with the kind of posture that suggested he was used to people doing exactly what he said, immediately. "Hey, buddy," Miller said, shining his flashlight directly into Julian's eyes for a split second, a tactical annoyance. "We got a 911 hang-up from this location. Everything okay here?" Julian blinked, confused. 911? I didn't call 911. "Well, your phone says otherwise," Miller said. "We got a ping right here. You alone?" "Yeah, I'm alone," Julian said. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and looked at the screen. Sure enough, there was the notification, "Emergency SOS triggered." "Oh man, I'm sorry, I must have butt dialed you guys. It was an accident. I'm just sitting here watching TV." This should have been the end of the interaction. A verified accidental call. A homeowner stating he is safe. A visual confirmation that no one is bleeding or screaming in the background. But Officer Miller wasn't ready to leave. He sniffed the air. He inhaled deeply, theatrically, like a sommelier identifying a rare vintage. "Okay, well, since we're here," Miller said, his tone shifting from inquiry to interrogation. "I can smell marijuana coming from inside the house." Julian froze. He knew exactly what the officer was smelling. He had been using a legal hemp-derived product, THCA, which was sold openly in smoke shops across the state. It was federally legal under the Farm Bill. It looked like cannabis, smelled like cannabis, but it was not, legally speaking, the controlled substance the officer was hunting for. "It's not marijuana," Julian said calmly. "It's hemp. It's legal. I bought it at the shop down on Main Street." "Uh-huh," Miller said, clearly not believing a word. "Listen, here's what we're going to do. You're going to give me your ID. I need to run your name." Julian hesitated. He knew the law. He knew that in Kentucky, you are not required to identify yourself to police unless they have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that you are committing a crime. Standing in your own doorway after an accidental phone call was not a crime. I don't have to give you my ID, Julian said. I didn't call you for an emergency. It was a mistake. I'm safe. You can leave now. Officer Miller's face hardened. The polite veneer evaporated instantly. He stepped forward, placing his heavy boot on the threshold of the door. The toe of his boot was now technically inside the house. This was the first violation, a small one physically, but a massive one constitutionally. You're going to give me your name, Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. Because I smell marijuana, and that gives me probable cause. In fact, I don't even need your ID. I can come in there right now and search the whole place. I can turn this house upside down. Julian looked at the boot. He looked at the officer's hand resting on his belt. He felt a surge of fear, but it was quickly overtaken by indignation. No, you can't, Julian said. Not without a warrant. You can't just walk into my house because you think you smell something. Watch me, Miller said. I don't need a warrant for smells. It's just like a car. If I pull you over and smell weed, I search the car. Same thing here. If I smell weed at the door, I search the house. This statement was a legal hallucination. It was a complete fabrication of Fourth Amendment law. But Miller said it with such absolute conviction that a lesser-informed citizen might have stepped aside. Julian didn't step aside. That is not true, Julian said. This is a private residence. It's not a car. You need a warrant, and you don't have one. Miller laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. You want to play lawyer? Okay. We can play lawyer, but you're going to lose. You're being difficult, and that makes me think you're hiding something. Maybe you're not alone. Maybe there's someone hurt in there. I told you I'm alone, Julian said. I offered to show you the product. I can bring the package to the door. It has the receipt. It has the lab report. I don't care about your receipt, Miller snapped. I care about your ID. Give it to me, or we're going to have a problem. The standoff had begun. On one side, a young man armed only with his knowledge of the Constitution. On the other, two armed officers armed with a profound misunderstanding of their own authority. We're just getting started, and already we see the friction point. It's that moment when authority demands submission simply for the sake of submission. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with a badge, whether a cop, a security guard, or a manager, made up a rule just to get their way? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. It's important to share these stories so we know we aren't alone. The tension on the porch was palpable. The second officer, Officer Trent, had been hanging back, but now he stepped up. He was older, heavy-set, with a demeanor that suggested he just wanted to get this over with, regardless of the legalities. Look, son, Trent said, just give us the ID. Why make this hard? We verify who you are, we check that you're 21, since you have to be 21 to buy that hemp stuff anyway, and we get out of your hair. I'm 23, Julian said. But that's not the point. You're claiming you can search my house. You're threatening me. It's not a threat, Miller interrupted. It's a promise. If you don't cooperate, I'm coming in. I'm going to verify your age. I'm going to verify the safety of the residence, and I'm going to seize whatever illegal narcotics I find. It's not illegal, Julian shouted, frustration bubbling over. How many times do I have to tell you? It is legal hemp. Then prove it, Miller said. Let us in. No. Julian planted his feet. I am not letting you in. Get a warrant. Miller sighed. He looked at his partner. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, can you run a check on the address? 402 Maple Drive. He turned back to Julian. Since you won't tell me who you are, I'll find out anyway. We'll run the property records. We'll see who owns this place. Is it your daddy's house? Does daddy know you're smoking dope in his living room? The attempt to infantilize him was transparent. Miller was trying to bruise his ego, to make him feel like a naughty child rather than a citizen with rights. It's my parents' house, Julian said, and they know I live here. And that doesn't change the Fourth Amendment. You keep talking about amendments, Miller sneered. You sound like one of those YouTube lawyers. Let me tell you about the real world. In the real world, if I smell a crime, I investigate it. That's my job. Miller then shifted his weight. He moved his foot further into the doorway. Julian instinctively tried to close the door, but it hit the officer's boot with a dull thud. Don't you dare close that door on me, Miller barked. That is assault on an officer. You slam a door on my foot, you're going to jail tonight. Get your foot out of my house, Julian yelled. You are trespassing. I am conducting an investigation, Miller shouted back. And right now I am detaining you. You are not free to leave. You are not free to close this door. This was the foot-in-the-door technique, a literal and metaphorical violation. By keeping the door physically open, Miller was manufacturing an exigent circumstance. He was creating a conflict where none existed, hoping that Julian would panic, shove him, or retreat, giving him the excuse to rush in. But Julian didn't retreat, and he didn't shove. He stood his ground, keeping his hands visible, refusing to escalate the physical confrontation while refusing to yield the legal one. "I want a supervisor," Julian said. "Call your sergeant, right now." Miller rolled his eyes. "Oh, you want the sergeant? You think he's going to tell you something different? He's going to tell you exactly what I'm telling you, that you're obstructing justice." "Call him," Julian insisted. "He's already on his way," Miller lied. Or maybe he wasn't lying. Maybe he knew he needed cover for what he was about to do. While they waited, Miller tried a new tactic. He began to lecture Julian on the plain smell doctrine. "You know, the Supreme Court has ruled on this," Miller said, with the confidence of a man who had never actually read a Supreme Court opinion. "It's called plain smell. If I walk past a window and I see a gun, I can go in. If I walk past a door and I smell drugs, I can go in. It's the same thing." It wasn't the same thing, not even close. The Supreme Court, in cases like Johnson v. United States, 1948, and Chapman v. United States, 1961, had explicitly ruled that odors alone, whether burning opium or moonshine mash, do not justify a warrantless entry into a home. They justify a warrant application, sure, but they do not give an officer a golden ticket to kick down a door. And more recently, in Florida v. Jardines, 2013, the court held that bringing a drug-sniffing dog onto a porch was a search in itself, requiring a warrant. The sanctity of the home is the highest bar in American law. To cross it, you need more than a nose and a hunch. You need a judge's signature, or you need an active emergency, like someone screaming for help or a suspect fleeing into the house in hot pursuit. Neither of those things was happening here. But Officer Miller didn't care about case law. He cared about winning the argument. "You're making a mistake, kid," Miller said, his voice dropping to a faux sympathetic whisper. "Just show me the ID. We verify you're 21. We verify the product, and we walk away. Don't ruin your life over a piece of plastic." "I'm not ruining my life," Julian said. "You are violating my rights. And I'm recording this, by the way." Julian pointed to the security camera mounted above the door, its small red light blinking steadily in the twilight. Miller looked up at the camera. He didn't flinch. In his mind, he was the good guy. He was the thin blue line. The camera would only show him doing his job, or so he thought. The arrival of the supervisor, Sergeant Baker, changed the energy on the porch, but not in the way Julian had hoped. Baker was an older man with gray hair and a weary expression. He walked up the driveway with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who had seen it all and was tired of most of it. Julian felt a flicker of hope. Surely the supervisor would know the law. Surely he would tell Miller to back off. "What do we have here?" Baker asked, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. Miller turned to his superior. "Sarge, we got a 911 hang-up. Verified accidental, but when we got to the door, strong odor of marijuana. Subject refuses to ID, refuses to cooperate, claims it's legal hemp." Baker looked at Julian. He looked at the foot in the door. "Is that right, son?" Baker asked. "You refusing to ID?" "I'm not refusing to ID," Julian said. "I'm refusing to be searched without a warrant. Your officer says he can come in just because he smells something. I told him that's not the law." Baker chewed on his lip. He looked at Miller. Then he looked back at Julian. "Well," Baker drawled, "technically he's right about the probable cause. If we smell marijuana, that is a crime in the state of Kentucky. We have to investigate crimes." Julian's heart sank. The supervisor wasn't a check on power. He was an amplifier of it. "So you're saying you don't need a warrant to enter my home?" Julian asked, incredulous. "You're saying the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply because you smell a plant?" "I'm saying," Baker said, choosing his words carefully, "that if we believe evidence is being destroyed, or if we believe a crime is in progress, we have certain latitudes, and if you continue to be difficult, we might have to exercise those latitudes." "I'm not destroying evidence," Julian shouted. "I'm standing here talking to you. I'm not flushing anything." "We don't know that," Baker said. For all we know, you got a grow operation back there, or you got friends flushing kilos down the toilet right now." "I am alone," Julian pleaded. "We can't verify that unless we come in," Miller added smugly. It was a circular argument designed to trap him. "We need to come in to see if you're alone. We need to see if you're alone to know if you're destroying evidence. We need to know if you're destroying evidence to justify coming in." "This is insane," Julian muttered. "I want to talk to you, Sergeant. Alone. Without him." He pointed at Miller. "He's my officer," Baker said. "He stays." "He's aggressive," Julian said. "He threatened to kick my door in. He has his foot in my house. That is trespassing." "He's securing the scene," Baker corrected. "He's ensuring officer safety." "Officer safety?" Julian laughed bitterly. "From what? A guy in his socks holding a cell phone?" Baker stepped up onto the porch. Now there were 3 of them looming over the threshold. The pressure was immense. "Look," Baker said, "we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is you show us your ID, we take a quick look to make sure there's no meth lab in your kitchen, and we leave. The hard way is we detain you for obstruction. We get a warrant, and then we tear your house apart looking for every seed and stem." This was the ultimatum. The bluff. Julian looked at the 3 men. He realized they were terrified of one thing: being wrong. They had committed too much to this stop. They couldn't just walk away now without losing face. They needed a win, even a small one. "I will show you my ID," Julian said, his voice steady. "Through the window. I will not open the door further, and you will not come inside." The officers exchanged glances. It was a compromise. It wasn't the total submission they wanted, but it was enough to write in the report. Subject identified. "Fine." Miller spat. "Show me the ID." Julian stepped back, grabbed his wallet from the side table, and held his driver's license up to the glass of the side window. Miller shone his flashlight on it, squinting to read the text. "Julian Hayes," Miller read aloud. "DOB, 2000. Okay, you're of age. Satisfied?" Julian asked through the glass. "For now," Miller said, "but I'm running you. If you have warrants, I'm coming in." Miller walked back to his patrol car. Julian stayed at the window, watching. He saw Miller typing into the laptop. He saw the officer pick up the radio. Minutes ticked by. The air was cold coming through the cracked door, but Julian was sweating. Finally, Miller walked back. He looked disappointed. "No warrants," Miller said. "You're lucky." "I'm not lucky," Julian said. "I'm a law-abiding citizen." "You're a guy smoking weed who got caught," Miller corrected. "But since the homeowners aren't here, and we can't prove who specifically is smoking it without entering, we're going to let this go with a warning." A warning. For a crime he didn't commit, involving a substance that wasn't illegal in a house they had no right to enter. "But listen to me," Baker added, leaning in. "If we get another call here, if we get another hang-up, we won't be so nice. You misuse the 911 system again, you're going for a ride. Do you understand?" "I understand," Julian said. "I understand perfectly." He understood that they were bullies who had lost, and they were trying to save face with a final threat. "Get your foot out of my door," Julian said. Miller hesitated. For a second it looked like he might push in anyway, just to prove he could. But then he slowly withdrew his boot. "Have a good night, Mr. Hayes," Miller said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Goodbye," Julian said. He slammed the door. He threw the deadbolt. He engaged the chain. Then he slumped against the wood, his legs shaking uncontrollably. Outside he heard the officers walking away. He heard them laughing. "Did you see his face?" Miller's voice drifted through the wood. Thought he was gonna cry. "Lawyers," Baker chuckled. "Everybody's a lawyer these days." The car doors slammed. The engines started, and they were gone. Julian didn't just go back to watching TV. He sat in the dark for a long time, replaying the encounter in his mind. He felt violated. He felt unsafe in his own home, but he also felt something else. Resolve. He pulled the footage from his security camera. He saved it to 3 different hard drives. Then he uploaded it. The video didn't just go viral, it exploded. Millions of people watched Officer Miller put his foot in the door. Millions heard the sergeant validate a false interpretation of the Fourth Amendment. Legal scholars broke it down frame by frame. The Owensboro Police Department was flooded with calls. Not just from angry citizens, but from lawyers offering to represent Julian pro bono. There was no big lawsuit that made Julian a millionaire. The system rarely works that fast or that generously. But there was an internal investigation. Officer Miller was reprimanded for his conduct. Sergeant Baker was forced to undergo retraining on search and seizure laws. But the real victory wasn't in the punishment of the officers. It was in the education of the public. Julian's video became a training tool. It became a reference point for thousands of people who might find themselves in that exact same situation. This story forces us to ask a difficult question. We grow up trusting that the police know the law. We assume that if an officer says, "I have the right to come in," they must be telling the truth. But what happens when they are wrong? What happens when their training is flawed or their ego is too big to admit a mistake? Julian Hayes held the line. He didn't fight physically. He fought with knowledge. He knew that the Constitution wasn't just a piece of paper in a museum. It was a shield that he had to hold up himself. So, I have to ask you, what would you have done? If a cop put his foot in your door and told you he was coming in, would you have stepped aside? Would you have believed him? Let me know in the comments. And if you think every American should know their Fourth Amendment rights, share this video. Send it to a friend, because the next time that doorbell rings, it might not be a delivery driver. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, stay educated, and know your rights. I'll see you in the next one.